Two guys tried breaking into my house. It seems that lately I've been going through a weird phase in my life. Between some major shifts in my family's dynamics, I've also found myself in dangerous situations that I'd never experienced previously. I live with a roommate in the old part of Lisbon. When this happened, my roommate was also enjoying vacations in Algarve, meaning I was completely alone. My sister used to live with me, but she moved cities, so I transformed her bedroom into a living room, where I spend most of my time when I'm home. Our neighborhood is pretty peaceful. Some of the neighbors are a bit weird and temperamental, but they're also good people who would pick up your mail and keep it safe for you. Still, it isn't uncommon to hear them having heated arguments until dawn. Last Friday was one of those nights. I got home at around 1 a.m. after some drinks with my friends. The house was pretty warm, so I opened up my main window right next to the couch. I feel pretty energized and decide not to go to bed and watch some movies while my neighbors shouted bloody murder at each other. I always watch movies wearing earphones, but I had forgotten them at work on that day, so I had to content myself with struggling to hear what the characters were saying through the entire movie. Thank God I forgot them. For a while now, between the movie and my neighbors bickering, I could also hear someone somewhere beneath my house, whispering. I couldn't understand what was being said, but I realized there were at least two guys. I live on the first floor and reason these guys were right beneath my window. I didn't think much of it. The area where I live is smack dab middle of three main nightlife areas, so drunk people hang there till late is pretty common also. I also consider these two could be somehow related to my neighbors. Maybe their bickering drove them into the street, and they were whispering because they didn't want to wake up the other neighbors. All in all, it seemed like a completely normal night for my neighborhood, but my gut feeling was telling me I should be alert. I tried to rationalize why I was feeling so anxious, but only one question kept popping up in my mind. Why are there two guys beneath my window? There are many places where you can sit and talk to a drunk friend in my street, but beneath my window, there was just a door, no step where you could sit, nothing, just a dirty road and a door. That was weirding me out, but I rationalized that they had been there for a while, so there probably was no danger at all. I heard a loud metallic clank. I nearly jumped out of my couch, all the time telling myself that I am being paranoid. I figured something had happened. I look outside my window without getting too close to it. I see nothing. I think about trying my roommate's window to inspect the street and begin moving in that direction. On the corner of my field of vision, a hand suddenly appears at the bottom of my porch, then another. I look at the scene, trying to process what I'm seeing. In a flash, my head is flooded with questions and time seems to be moving really slow. What is he doing? Is he trying to balance himself on my porch? How do you get up so high on here? What does he want? What I was feeling wasn't outright fear, just massive confusion, the type that precedes fear. It felt like my brain was melting inside of my skull. My hands are laboriously working my porch as he tries to climb high enough to get his foot on it. I realize he hadn't seen me yet. He speaks to his colleague, "Push now! Push now!" Those words snapped me back to reality. The guy was really trying to break in. I sprint to the window. Each step hit the wood floor like thunder. This alerted them to my presence. In a flash, I'm on my porch, my fist high in the air, ready to knock this guy down. But before I get the chance, he's let go and falls to the ground on his 2 feet. Both of them sprint up the street running and looking back to see if I am coming too. My face is locked in a furious glare, but honestly, the reality of the situation is starting to crash on me, and all of my energy seems to have suddenly vanished. I sit back on my couch. My legs are shaking wildly. I phone a friend, but my words struggle to come out. I begin trying to make sense of it all. Only then did I realize something that chilled me to the bone. My lights were on, the window was open, and I had been walking around a lot in the living room to grab snacks and other stuff. These guys knew someone was home, and they still tried to break in. I hadn't been sleeping right since that night. I kept trying to figure out what was their goal. What if my sister lived there still? I think what shocked me the most was having a place you used to consider safe suddenly being violated, and all your senses of security is gone. Now I only feel safe by the window whenever I'm smoking, because I can see who's walking up and down the street. The rest of the time, I keep looking over my shoulder. I really just want to feel safe in my home again. Salesman tried to break in our house. This encounter happened when I was about 10 years old. My sister and I were home alone since it was during the summer. Both our mom and grandmother were busy, so they could not stay home with us. We were used to being alone, home during the summertime, so it was not a big deal. The only thing we could not do was go outside or open the door if someone knocked. During this day, I got up and started to play The Sims 2 in our kitchen. My sister was watching TV in our den. A few hours into gaming, I thought I heard the doorbell ring. At first I thought it was my game, but I had turned off the sound. So I asked my sister if she heard the doorbell. She replied no, she hadn't. She said it was probably just the show she was watching. I brushed it off and went back to playing my game. About 10 minutes later, I see a reflection on my computer of a man in a suit. His hands cupped around his eyes, looking through the glass doors behind me. I turned around to be face to face with this strange man I'd never seen before. I had no idea how long he had been watching me. He waved at me like he knew me from somewhere. I called my sister's name, who had not noticed the man yet. She grabbed the house phone quickly, calling out grandmother. Now, we had seen salespeople before. None of them looked like this guy. He was wearing a full black-on suit and did not fit him. If not strange enough that this guy was wearing a full-on suit in 99 degrees, he was also carrying a briefcase as well. All the salespeople I'd ever seen only ever had a clipboard or maybe a couple flyers, but this man had an actual briefcase. The next flag that came with this guy, he walked around our house to come back to the back door, which during his little trip, he would have seen there wasn't a car in the driveway, indicating there was no one home. As I was getting to hide, the man reached down and grabbed the doorknob. He started to jiggle it forcefully. Thankfully, the door was locked. He looks at me smiling, gestured at me to come unlock the door for him. All the noise he had been making had now set off our 75-pound lad mix, making her go batshit crazy. No way she was gonna let the guy get to us if he did get in. My sister tells me our grandmother is on her way, and she wanted us to hide in the back of the house in her room until she could get home. My sister hands me the phone, then runs into the kitchen to grab the biggest knife we have. I can hear her yelling at the guy that we called the cops. She comes back into the room with me. We shut the door. She tells me after she lied to the guy about calling the cops, she said he started laughing. Like she just told him the funniest joke that he's ever heard in his whole entire life. A little while later, we hear the door open, and my grandmother calling us. We come up to meet her. She tells us she did not see a man anywhere in sight. She had walked around the whole house before unlocking the door. She also thought it was weird. He was, if he was a salesperson, he would have left a note saying, sorry we missed you or something like that. She ended up taking the rest of the day off to stay with us. Also, so she could watch if the man could come back around. It's been 11 years since the encounter, and the man's never come back. And I still don't want to know what was in his briefcase. He tried to break in. So about a year ago, my parents and I were offered to stay a week in a friend's cottage in northern Michigan. Of course, we accepted the offer and packed up our things and brought our Great Dane with us. About 5 days into the stay, my parents went a few towns away to hit some bars and have fun. I didn't mind because I like being alone a lot of the time. At about 12:30, my parents weren't home yet and my dad started flipping out. He was running all over the house, growling and barking. Naturally, I am scared shitless. I grab my pocket knife and barricade the bedroom door. For about 10 minutes, my dog continues barking. When my dog stops barking, I get a call from my parents. They say they're too drunk to drive home and are gonna stay at a motel nearby. I don't get a minute of sleep that night, and when I decide it's safe enough to get up, I noticed something that chilled me to the bone. The screens to my bedroom windows were cut. I burst out of my room and see that every screen in the cottage is cut. What I think happened is that some creep decided to try to break into the cottage through the doors originally. Since I'm careful about security, I made sure those were locked. After the creep was unsuccessful with the doors, he cut the screens and tried to get in through the windows. It had been a hot night that night, so before my parents left, they turned on the AC and I locked the windows. I assumed that he made some sort of noise that woke up my dog, causing my dog to freak out. Then the creep must have left. I called my parents and then called the cops. The cops didn't find any trace of the guy, and as soon as they were done with the investigations, my family and I were out of there. So, to the guy who tried to break into my cottage my family was staying in, let's not meet. Stalker breaks in. This happened to me in 2008 in Las Vegas. I was living with my husband and our son, who was about 2 years old at the time. Well, I would frequently take our son to the grocery store early evening with me to do some shopping and give my hubby some alone time. I never really worried. The store was literally right outside my neighborhood. Plus, I lived in a decent neighborhood. I finished my shopping and put my son in his car seat. By the time I finished loading the car, he was passed out, so I decided to quickly fill my tank at the gas station on the other side of the parking lot. While I finished pumping gas, a big truck pulls up on the opposite side of the pump. The man pumps his gas, seems to take no notice of me, and leaves. As I'm finishing up the trunk, suddenly pulls up next to my car, and the man, who looks like he loves his meth, says, "Excuse me, miss, but I just felt compelled to tell you how beautiful you are. As a matter of fact, the only reason I came to get gas here is because I saw you come from the grocery store and just wanted to be nearer to you. I've been trying to get the courage to approach you for a while." I was flattered, thanked him for the compliment, but quickly informed him I was off the market. He responded, "I know, it was worth a shot," and began to pull off. Suddenly he backed up and said, "If you tell your husband what I said, I'll kill him," then drove off. Needless to say, this freaked me out, so I immediately called my husband. He told me to not come directly home in case the guy follows me. So I drove around until I felt that I lost him. Then I went home. My husband and I went over it over and over again. How could he possibly kill my husband if he doesn't know him or where we live? Then some of the things he said started to ring in my head, like how he'd been watching me at the grocery store. I started to think, how long, how many days has he seen me there? How I told him I was married. He said he knew. Is it possible that he followed me home on previous occasions as well? We put extra locks on the doors, took extra precautions, and tried to forget about it. He was probably just some crazy guy, right? Well, about a week later, at around 8 or 9 p.m., my husband decided to run up to the gas station to get cigarettes. I was sitting on the computer in our dining room as he left through the garage door with our son, sleeping in his bedroom on the other side of the house. A minute after he left, I heard the garage door into the laundry room open and somebody come in. I immediately assumed it was my husband grabbing something he forgot. I called out to him and didn't get a response, so I called his name again and received no answer, but could hear someone moving around in the laundry room. I started to worry. All the guns in the house were in our room. I would have to walk right past the laundry room to get to them. Suddenly, I heard my 2 pit bulls from my room start growling. Both dogs started barking viciously and ran towards the laundry room, at which point I heard the laundry room door open to the garage and slam shut very quickly. At that point, I grabbed my phone and ran into my son's room and called my husband to ask him if he had just returned home for something. To my horror, he said no, that he was at the gas station. I told him someone was in the house, but I think the dogs had scared him out. He instructed me to stay in our son's bedroom with the door closed, that he was on his way home, so I sat in the dark next to my sleeping son in terror. 2 minutes later, I heard the dogs barking, and someone come into the house again through the garage door. After what felt like forever, my husband came into our son's bedroom. He checked the whole house all around our property but could not find anybody. We came to the conclusion that the stalker from the gas station must have finally taken his opportunity to catch me alone. And based on what the creepy tweakers had said to me, who else could it have been? What really freaked me out is not knowing how long he had been watching me. For before that, how long he had been watching me before he approached me at the gas station and before he came into our home. It really opened my eyes that someone could stalk you without you ever knowing about it until it's too late. I believe my 2 pit bulls saved my life, my son's life, and possibly my husband's too that night. That had my husband not let the dogs in the house before he left, I wouldn't be here right now, nor would my son, and to this day, any time I have to be home alone or my new husband and I are sleeping, I have to have my pit bull inside to watch over me. I thank God every day for my pit bull and the unconditional love and protection she provides me and my family. The face in the window. Moving to Michigan from North Carolina was a big change for all of us. The climate was a huge difference for us, since we weren't used to the cold, along with having to start a new school and meeting new people. However, There were other major differences as well. These ones weren't as innocent. When we came to Michigan, our parents bought a one-story house that had originally come with 2 bedrooms. But having 3 girls, our parents remodeled and added another room. The neighborhood was a friendly one with lots of children our age to play around with. It seemed like we had hit the jackpot with this home. At the time, I was the youngest. When we moved, I was only 5. For the first 2 years of living there, things went great. Even with the 3rd bedroom, my sisters and I still liked to sleep in the same bedroom, as we were all very close. Most nights we would roughhouse around and watch TV until we were yelled at by our parents to go to bed. The night the incident happened, we were doing exactly that. It was late one night, and my sisters were on the bed roughhousing. That particular night we were watching Ghost Hunters. I had gotten up to use the bathroom. I'm not sure what caused me to look out the window, but I felt like something was watching me. As I turned my head to look out, fear froze me to my spot. It was like being in a nightmare, and not being able to do anything, as a face stared back at me, was enough to send ice-cold shivers down my body, and a knot to build up in my throat. I wasn't sure what to do. Did I call for my sisters and them call me crazy? What if the person behind the window tried breaking through? I was completely terrified as I looked into this man's face, as he stared right back at me. He had no expression on his face, only blank eyes that would keep me awake for nights to come. With a sudden burst of courage, I managed to get out a meek whisper, "Guys, there's someone in the window." Of course, my first fear was correct, and my older sisters did not believe me. They thought I was playing a joke on them, as I kept an eye on the face, making sure it would not disappear, but at the same time wishing it would. Finally, after convincing them to just look, they both got up and saw him. My eldest sister ran for our father as my sister and I both stood there in fright, unsure of what to do. My dad had woken up, and along with our trusty black lab and wolf mix Susie, he managed to chase the man away. Our dad called the cops, but they told us that since he had not tried to break in or hurt us, they couldn't do anything about it. We started locking our doors after that. After this incident, we began to question the neighbors, and they all responded the same. The family with a fence around their property had an adult son who was mentally disabled, who would go around the neighborhood and look into girls' windows. It had even gotten so bad with one of the neighbors' girls that her father had made a bat with nails sticking out of it as a threat for what could happen if the man had tried to come back to his home. My parents took this serious and proceeded to put inside locks, the dark curtains on our windows so he couldn't see through. It seemed like the man had gotten the hint, and we did not have any more encounters. That is until one night, my oldest sister, who was a young teenager at the time, had just gone out of the shower and was about to get dressed when she heard a noise at her window. She decided to stay in her towel and take a glance out the window to see what the noise was. When she saw the man's face looking back at her, she screamed for my parents and immediately left her room. My dad was immediately up with a baseball bat and going after the man with Susie on his heels. My dad has let Susie go ahead with him with one marching order, "Get him!" Being the loyal dog she was, Susie took off after the man and bit his ankle, taking him down. While this was happening, my mother was on the phone with the police, who were on the way. With help from Susie, our dad had captured the man and held him until the cops showed. They arrested him, but because of his disability, he was let go the following day. My parents were fucking furious. They couldn't understand how the police could let someone off who had been caught multiple times trespassing into other people's yards and looking into younger girls' windows. They, along with the other neighbors, set up a neighborhood watch. They made sure that us kids were watched 24/7 and that no harm would come to us. Something that should be known about my father is that he is an ex-Marine who developed PTSD, with one of the side effects being insomnia. My dad has taken advantage of this during these incidences, and he would keep watch of the house and constantly would check the yard for the man. This helped to make us kids feel safer because we knew, with our dad watching over us, we'd be safe. It had been barely over a week since the man had looked into my sister's room when he came again. This time it was only my middle sister and I in our room. It was still early evening, and my parents and their friend were hanging out in the living room. We had an early bedtime because it was a school night, so we were both in bed about to fall asleep when we began to hear noises, like someone was trying to get inside. Fear immediately gripped both my sister and I, as we both knew was most likely happening. Her being older and more brave, she jumped out of bed and ran to tell the adults what was happening. I, however, was once again frozen in fear, as I could hear the man trying to force open our locked window. I could do nothing more than hide under my covers and hope that he couldn't come in. It wasn't long before the adults were in the room looking out the window. My mom came to comfort me while my dad checked things out. Since it was winter out, my dad could see the man's footprints below our window along with handprints on our window. His temper immediately flared. As he told my mother to call the cops again, he decided to take matters into his own hands and walked over to the man's house. While there, he told the man's parents what their son had been doing and that the cops were already on their way. He made sure that the man was arrested and pressed charges. To this day, my sister and I are still scarred by what happened. We refuse to have any of the windows left uncovered and locked, and always make sure the doors are locked. I'm not sure whatever happened to him after he was arrested, but there was never again a face in our window after that. So, to the man in the window, let's not meet again. Near break-in. This happened around the summer of 2012 in Houston, Texas. I was 14 and lived alone with my mother because my parents had separated the year before. Now, before I start, I want to give you a layout of the apartment complex we lived in. There was about 30 to 40 small two-story buildings that made up the complex. During that time, the complex was pretty empty for its size. Only about 50 of over 200 apartments were being rented, so there weren't many people outside. We live in one of the first floor apartments. It was a Saturday night. My mom was going to a party at about 10 minutes away. I was actually looking forward to being home alone watching movies and eating a lot of junk food. About 30 minutes after my mom left, I started to hear the sound of the window in my room trying to open. At first I thought it was cats playing outside my window since I've seen it happen more than once. Then I heard someone mumbling to himself outside my window. I was beginning to panic and grabbed a knife and a baseball bat. After about a minute of the person trying to open the window, I heard silence. I thought that he had given up and left. Then a few seconds later, I heard the person trying to open my mom's window, which was also locked. I grabbed the phone and called my mom and told her what was going on. She told me to stay where I was and that she would be here in less than 10 minutes. She also told me to tell the person that I was armed and that I was going to call the police. This seemed to work because as soon as I told him this, I heard him say something along the lines of, "Oh crap." A few minutes later, my mom arrived and I explained what happened. There was no sign of the guy outside, so we assumed that he was gone. We waited for about 30 minutes just to be sure, but nothing happened. I calmed down and my mom was on her way back to the party, but about 5 minutes after she left, I heard the guy trying to open the window again. I started panicking and immediately called my mom once again. She was only about 5 minutes away, so she turned the car around and got here as fast as she could, but once again the man was gone. This time she stayed home. We thought about calling the cops, but for some reason we decided not to. We have had no other incidences since then in the apartments. I always thought that I could deal with these situations as a tough guy, but when it actually happened, I chickened out. So, to the creepy guy trying to break into my house, let's not meet again.